All right, I wasn't able to have this guy on before the season, but he's here now. Our old friend Michael Lombardi. Week 1 in the books. Week 2 coming. This is one of my favorite. We text a lot during this time because there's a lot of stuff we either know for sure that people don't fully know yet, but we feel like we do, or there's stuff you think, but you want to see it for another week. And then there's this stuff that's just, I have no effing idea.
Right.
Here's one thing I know for sure, Lombardi. Malik Willis is terrible at playing quarterback. And he's going to start. He's going to start week 2 for the Packers. And I was waiting. I thought Monday they'd sign somebody, and Tuesday it's like, oh, when's the Tannehill announcement coming? Then Wednesday, and now it's Thursday. And they're just rolling with it. They're going to play Malik Willis, a guy that both of us watched play quarterback in real games. He started 3. He went 1 and 2. It didn't go well. And what are they doing? What are they thinking?
All right, so let's go back. We'll touch on Malik in a second. They tried to, Ryan Tannehill and Matt LaFleur have the same agent. So there was conversations, but I think Tannehill's like, I'm not going somewhere unless somebody pays X, Y, or Z. And so that ended that conversation. And now somebody in that building, I don't know who it was, saw a tape of Malik Willis, and I don't know what tape they watched, that said, hey, he's going to be a really good backup one day. Like, I don't know where that was. I'll be in search of it. I mean, it's like finding the Loch Ness Monster, that tape. But let's have a walk down memory lane and talk about one of the greatest games in NFL history, a game that should be in the Hall of Fame, a game that Malik Willis participated in. It was in early November in Kansas City. It was a Sunday night game. I'm sure Al's tie was perfectly laced up there. No, Al wasn't probably. Yeah, he might have been doing that. But anyway, so Kansas City plays Tennessee. Malik starts. And from the beginning, it's a disaster. Malik attempts 16 passes in the game. He completes 5. One of them was a 48-yarder to the tight end on the screen on the first drive of the game.
Yeah.
He came 80 yards in that game. Now, as bad as that was, the great Mike Vrabel, one of the great head coaches in our league, got the Kansas City Chiefs, who they won the Super Bowl that year, to overtime. And remember, it took 2 Patrick Mahomes runs scrambling out of the pocket to get the game to overtime. Like, that's how. And so, like, I don't know how this works for the Green Bay defense, and Matt LaFleur ain't Mike Vrabel. I could tell you that. Like, how do you do this? And so you sit there and say, here's what they all say whenever they get a quarterback like Malik. Everybody, well, we'll run a lot of boots, we'll run a lot of nakeds, we'll give him a lot of easy throws. The problem is he can't make an easy throw.
Yeah. I remember that game as the Mike Vrabel is one of the 5 or 6 best coaches in the league audition tape. And of course, he's unemployed right now.
Of course he is. That was one of the, I think that game belongs in Canton. I mean, that's one of the finest coaching, to take as good a coach as Andy Reid is with his Patrick Mahomes, and Kelsey was a better player. And they had guys, and to get that game to overtime when basically they were playing 10 on 11. I mean, do you realize this? I've said this many times. Malik Willis is the only quarterback I've ever seen in the history of my career that got benched during a drive in a preseason game. Vrabel had enough and basically set another quarterback out there and said, get him, because he was screwing up everybody else.
Well, how about they traded him for a 7th-round pick? What, a month ago? I know the Packers probably saw him as a reclamation project, but, you know, if they go 0-5 to start the season, or they go 1-4, I think they kind of have to go 2-3 in the first 5 if Love's really going to be gone a month. Maybe they think they can push him back sooner, but we've seen seasons where if the team doesn't fix it in the first month, it becomes impossible to come back. What do you think? It's 9 or 10 wins for the 7th seed in the NFC?
I think it'll be 9. I think there's too much competition. I don't know. Look, we get to the Bears later, but I don't know where this all comes from. But look, I don't know how you win games. I mean, if Indianapolis doesn't go up there, and if Malik Willis is the starter, now LaFleur is couching as if they're going to go eventually to that there's a chance that Love could play. I don't see how that is, but maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought. Maybe there's not any swelling. But I mean, if Indy doesn't go up there and win by 10 points, then something's really wrong with Indy, which I think something is really wrong with Indy. But Green Bay, I don't know. Look, it's so interesting when you follow this whole quarterback carousel. So Malik Willis and Bo Nix were both at Auburn. Bo Nix won the starting job. Malik transfers to Liberty, right? Sean Clifford, the 3rd-string quarterback at Green Bay, was at Penn State along with the great Will Levis. Levis couldn't beat him out. He's third string in Green Bay. Meanwhile, Levis is talking about being the starting quarterback and turning the Titans franchise around. Like, somebody makes sense of all this for me. Like, if Bill Walsh would have said, wait a minute, he didn't beat out Sean Clifford and we don't like Sean Clifford. Like, why do we think we're going to make him into a good player?
He started 3 games. They scored 48 points in the 3 games. He had 11 first downs in the 3 games. Passing first downs. Got sacked 10 times.
I think those numbers are painful to listen to, but watching them is more painful.
Yeah, I don't get it. You mentioned the Indianapolis defense because that's another piece of this game. Because I'm going to do $1 million picks later with House, and just spoiler alert, I just feel like this is a once in a lifetime chance to bet against Malik Willis. It seems like we're heading that way. And Indy's -3, and the reason they're -3 is because their defense, Houston ran all over it. But this is what I love about week 1 heading into week 2, where you think certain things because of what happened in week 1, but maybe some other things are true that you don't fully realize yet. And one of the things with Indy's D, and you've been super critical of them, Gus Bradley, vanilla scheme, all that stuff. And I totally get that. But what if Houston's offense is just awesome? And it's like, we either have to give up this. It's almost like San Francisco against the Jets. We either have to give up this or this. So we're going to give up this, and hopefully you don't kill us with this. And San Francisco's like, cool, we're going to run all over you. And Houston, it almost felt like they were more comfortable. You want to just run Joe Mixon? Cool. We don't want to give away big plays. We're afraid of Stroud. And if you want to gash us that way, I mean, they stayed in the game. They only lost by 2. So I guess my question is Indy's defense that bad, or is Houston's offense that good?
Okay, so Indy's defense is bad when they go against the coach who's very good at understanding what they're doing in their scheme. Indy's defense can look better at times when they go against not a good offensive coordinator, but Slowick understood what they were doing. And in your analogy there, they didn't take away Nico Collins. Like, if Gus Bradley would have worked for Al Davis from the time the season ended until that first game, he would every day, Al Davis would have called him on the phone and said, what are we planning on doing for Nico Collins? Like, we can't let Nico Collins beat us. And of course, Nico Collins beat us. I get the theory, let Joe Mixon run on it.
But one of those Nico Collins plays, he caught a pass with 2 guys draped all over him for like 50 yards. I don't know what else you can do in that situation.
It's the Belichick in and out coverage. Belichick hates that, you got him, I got him, nobody got him, right? And so he just ran, he split it. So I don't think Indy wants to win with their defensive line. And this whole theory of Bradley's defense is about, if we have 4 great defensive linemen, we'll win the game. That's not working anymore. You don't have 4 great defensive linemen. I mean, you're going to draft. You need a draft from Canton, not from the draft. So, look, I think Houston's really good. I think you're right that Houston is good. I think they're a little bit better based on Indy because there's so much that they know about one another. But I mean, look, Stroud made a couple throws that were big time throws that I didn't think he would make. I mean, the throw on 3rd and 9 at the end of the game was as good a throw as you're going to make. But to me, Indy's defense, anytime they play a good team who knows how to run the ball against them, who understands how to attack them, I don't think they're good enough.
Okay, but what if they're playing Malik Willis?
Well, that's where, so but here's what worries me. Me. That you would, like, if I'm in that building, I'm saying to Gus, we can't let them run bootlegs. We can't run nakeds. And if you have to get into a short yardage defense on 1st and 10, no matter what they put on the field,
8 in the box, baby. Let's go. Let's go 9 in the box. Can we put 11 in the box?
There was a game. There was a game when I was a kid. I was 13 years. I was 11 years old, and the Packers were playing my favorite team, the Washington Redskins. And George Allen was the coach. And the Green Bay Packers had Lynn Dickey at quarterback, and their best player was John Brockington. He was the running back. And I'll never forget this game. It was a playoff game. It was an RFK Stadium, and George Allen put 5 defensive linemen on the field. It was the first time anybody ever done it. He put 5 down, and he said to John Brockington, you run the ball. He had 13 carries for 9 yards in the game. And so, but that's what great coaches do. They say, okay, I know this is what this is the only way you can win the game. I'm going to take that away from you. That's what I would do if I was at Indy. I would say, okay, I dare you to run the ball. But these guys are scheme related. Like when you watch the Jets play 49ers, Kyle got in a formation where it's unbelievable. The Jets had a guy lined up in the A gap of the guard, and the next player was out at the outside shoulder of the tackle. There's a bubble that's as big as anybody to run through. But of course, the 34% winning percentage coach of the Jets, Robert Saleh, he made no adjustments to it. He was watching the game like I was. So I think, to me, we give so much credit for these guys making adjustments when these coaches are getting younger and younger and less about in-game adjustments and more about more scheme. What can we do? Like, they're not watching the game.
Well, I mean, Saleh does have 8 kids. So it's not like he's not prolific. I mean, he's got that going for him.
Yeah, I heard he's got a great golf game too.
The Green Bay Philly game, because Love gets hurt at the end, it throws the Green Bay situation in flux, and that's all anyone talked about after. But it was also a really interesting game. It was on a shit field. It's in Brazil. Both teams alternately look good for stretches. What did you see from Green Bay in that game before Love got hurt to make you think either they're a contender or they aren't? Because I was going into the season thinking they were either the second or the third best team in the NFC. And I left the game even before Love got hurt going, I don't know. Maybe they're below San Francisco and Philly and Detroit. Maybe they're in the 4 to 6 range.
I left that game thinking that maybe I've overevaluated their talent on defense, because I've always felt like they were better on defense than they really were. And they didn't look good on defense to me. They looked slow. They didn't look explosive. I mean, they've got some good edge rushers, but I thought Philly, who I don't think Philly's offensive line is the same as they were in the past. But I thought, torching your best corner for an 80-yard touchdown or 60-yard touchdown, I mean, you can't allow that to happen. I think Green Bay was overvalued. I initially thought the way you did, but as the summer went on and I went back and watched the tape, this is a team that lost to Tommy DeVito, right? This is a team that came home against Tampa and lost to Baker Mayfield the next week. So I think and Love is inconsistent at times. He will miss the strike zone. So I kind of felt like they would be a wild card. I never thought they could challenge Detroit for the North. I really didn't. At the end of the day, I thought they weren't good enough. And they're young. I mean, this is the other problem. They're so young that it's hard to, they probably spent the least amount of cap money of any team in the league, because they spend a lot this year because they signed Love, but they're so young. Now, they've got great receivers, don't get me wrong. The Eagles, I think the other issue is if it's a better field, I don't know what happens. The Eagles don't leave Brazil thinking the Eagles defense is better than it was last year. Like, I'm not sure that's right.
Yeah, and the Packers receivers, I didn't think had a very good game compared to what their talent is. But I look at these, House and I talked about this last week. Sometimes I wonder with these overseas games, if you just throw them out. They're almost like the Thursday games where it's just like, it's too weird. That game was 10 hours away. The field was shit. It was a Friday night. Everything about it was weird, and maybe you throw it away, but then Love gets hurt anyway. I think the one thing that jumped out from the Eagles side is just, Saquon Barkley's really good. Like, why were we overthinking this? This guy's better than DeAndre Swift. Stop.
Poor John Mara. I mean, don't you now? How about poor John Mara's weekend? This weekend, the owner of the Giants, he's got to go take the train down to Washington and hope he can beat that shitty team in Washington. I don't know what House thinks of them, but they're terrible. They have no secondary.
Well, their defense is atrocious.
It's atrocious, right? So now he's got to go down there and he's got to pray he wins. So then he's going to take the train back home. And then Monday night, he's going to sit in his nice, cozy, comfy chair in his living room and have to watch another Saquon Barkley parade. I mean, like, he saw it coming. I mean, he saw this coming.
Well, at least he has the clip, which we talked about on Sunday night, was like Vito Corleone in the conference room with all the people. I'm going to hold some people responsible in this room. If he gets hit by a lightning bolt, if he hangs himself in his jail cell. That's basically what he was saying.
I'm going to blame some of these people.
You're done. I'm going to blame some people in this room. You're going to be fucking out. But he, that was probably the best player in their team. And
I mean, look, he ran the ball effectively. I didn't think Hurts throws 2 interceptions. I worry about the Eagles defense, because if you can block Philly, you're going to throw the ball in Philly. Yeah. And you can't get away with Zach Braun and Najee Dean at linebacker. They're going to have to make some moves. To me, now I agree. Don't panic on it. It's a Friday. Those games you got to throw out. That field was so shitty. I don't understand why we went to Brazil and there was only like 48,000 people in the stands. Like, I think if we're going to go somewhere like that, shouldn't there be 100,000 in the joint?
Totally agree. And they didn't even know. They're cheering like kickoffs. They didn't even know what was going on.
No, they don't know.
If you
Like,
if you were the Giants,
go to Germany.
Right. Yeah, go somewhere that's also not that far away. If you're the Giants, when do you start thinking about what can we get for Dexter Lawrence?
Oh boy, I think if you're the Giants, you're not going to. You paid them. Well, do you want to give the Giants more draft picks after they picked Evan Neal and
Well,
some of
but
the
I
picks
just
they made?
assume everyone's
that's like giving
gone.
Sam Hankey draft picks. It's like giving Sam draft picks. I mean, like shit. You want to give him? But he had all these picks. He couldn't pick anybody.
Yeah, but I just assume everyone's gone. Everyone, maybe not Dayball, but everybody else will be gone after this year, right? So,
well, I think to me, you got to entice whoever they hire if they hire a next coach. Look, they're a 36% win percentage team since Tom Coughlin walked out the building. Yeah. I mean, and John Mara is a really nice person. I think they do a horrible job of evaluating themselves. I think one of the things I think we have to learn in sports, and I learned this when I was in the league. I think you know it too. When you let Hard Knocks in your building, when you let them in your building, you better be really good at your job. Because if you're not, and the fans see that you're not, and you start losing, you're going to lose your job.
I'm trying to think of a single scenario where it would make sense to do that.
Yeah, Unless
the only time like Belichick did those Do Your Job, those documentaries where they followed the team for a year. But at that point, he'd won Super Bowls. He really cares about the history of the NFL. And I think he wanted people to document. Like he also let people write books about them and things like that. If you're a 6-10 team, 6-11 team, or you're the Giants, or you're like the Bears who you haven't done anything yet and you've got a rookie QB, why the fuck do I want cameras around? Why do I want people videotape stuff? Why do I want sound bites, especially in social media era?
Because you think you're good. The answer to the question is you think you're good. You think what you're doing is good. Like, I think it exposed the Giants for incompetence. Like, they had no plan. They had no model. That's not how you run a team. I'm insulted as a personnel guy who spent my life in the NFL thinking that Joe Shane did what most people do. That's not how you run an NFL team. That's if a guy was at a bar at Biggie's in North Jersey. That's how he would run the team, not how a professional would run the team. So when you let them in, right? Do you remember the one when I love this scene, when Herm Edwards was sitting there, they had the camera on him. Dick Curl, his confidant, who was his game manager, who could screw up everything for him. Dick Curl was like, throw it here. And when you shouldn't throw it, it was like, and so he's sitting there in his office and he's pondering whether he should shut Damon Huard or Brady Coyle. And like, that neither one's any good. So it doesn't matter who you should start. But to me, once the Kansas City fans saw that they lost all confidence in their team. And that's what happens to the Giants. You think those fans in the Meadowlands believe what they saw from Shane and they saw from their front office, that they had any confidence? And then their best player Lawrence, the best player in the history of their franchise, comes out and says, I can get 22 guys to beat this team.
I think Hard Knocks, the risk reward, the seesaw is like 95% risk, 5% reward. Like, I still remember the first one ever. It was the Ravens one. It was after they'd won. And Brian Billick was the coach. And I remember I wrote about it for ESPN way back when, and they took out like 10 of my best jokes. But it was Brian Billick just blowharding it out of his mind. And at one point he was on a hammock and he's reading like some, success book and just like blowharding. And you're watching going, does this guy realize they're filming this? This guy realized like this is going to be on television, that this conversation. I would never do it. I don't understand the upside, especially if you're a team that hasn't really proven anything. But when you're the Giants, it's not like you're getting the fans more fired up. It's not like you're selling more tickets. You're not selling more merchandise. There's no upside.
Right. And this week 2 of the season, I mean, this is, if Dave Ball goes down there and loses this game, they'd already have no fan base. I mean, Daniel Jones looks like David Carr now. He's just afraid to get hit. He just gotten hit so much he can't do it.
I feel like that was almost insulting to David Carr, though.
It probably is. I mean, look, I think they should win. I mean, if I had any guts if I had to pick 5 games, I would probably take the Giants plus the points because, you got to take 5. But I can understand why you can't. I mean, but I think to me, they should beat them. Now, Malik Neighbors, before we came on, it's rumored he might have hurt himself in practice today. I don't know how bad that is. So, but look, I think when you let them into your building, you better be damn sure you control. I said, I'm up at NFL Films every Tuesday with Belichick doing his pod. And
Yeah.
I asked Ken Rogers, the guy who does the hard
Yep.
knock stuff, I said, Ken, if that's what they showed us, what do you have on the floor? Like, what did you cut out? And he just laughed. I mean, like, I guess they didn't cut anything out, Bill. They must not cut anything out. Like, if that's what they're showing us, how bad could the other stuff be?
If I was the GM, I would have definitely cut out the Saquon Barkley conversation with my owner, basically like, you're fucking fucked if this doesn't work out. So Big Shot Bob Saleh, who's 18 and 34 career, who's one of the 20 worst coaches of all time who have coached over 50 games. So you have him on the Jet side going into Tennessee in the all-time trap game. It's even got the 3.5 point trap line. There's just caution flags and the lanes are moving to one lane. There's construction workers on the road. Like, nobody wants you to keep going down this road with the Jets. They had, all kinds of buzz before the year. I fell for it. I picked them against San Francisco. I bet on them. I bet on them to win the division. And they just got outcoached and run over. And now they're playing Tennessee. So you have that. And then you have Daboll and the Giants, where it's scapegoat time, which we've seen this over and over. We see it. The Lakers do it every year or 2 years. Pelinka's, I don't know what Darvin Ham's doing. It's like, you picked fucking players. So it's Darvin Ham's fault. It's Frank Vogel's fault 2 years ago. It was Luke Walton's fault 6 years ago. But somehow you're still here. Right? So it's always the coach. What's going on? So the Giants, so Daboll will be the scapegoat. I know you're friends with them, but how early can you fire a coach during an NFL season? Like, what's crazy? Is it crazy to do it in the first 5 games? Like, you've just gone through preseason, training camp, everything?
Well, we mentioned George Allen earlier. He got fired in preseason. Carl Rosenblum fired him in preseason one year. Look, I think you have to give it some time, right? I mean, because 0-2 can turn around. I think, to me, it's when the coach loses the locker room. And I think, to me, that Hard Knocks has made it very challenging. Now, just if the Giants win this week doesn't make them a good team. Let's be clear. They're not getting, I don't think they get to their 5-win total, because when Sam Darnold goes 99 yards on you and you've got $8 billion in your defensive line and you can't get close to him, you got deeper problems than just Brian Daboll, right?
Yeah.
Look, Tom Coughlin left. Do you remember the scene when Coughlin left? I mean, he walked right by John Mara after the press conference. Didn't even shake his hand. He was pissed. Do you remember that? And so they fire Coughlin for Ben McAdoo for Pat Shurmur, right? Pat Shurmur for Joe Judge for Daboll. That's 4 in a row. What happens to me when they're...
By the way, 3 doozies before Daboll. I
Right.
mean, that was really the trifecta.
3 guys that had no business being a head coach. I mean, no business being a head coach.
And never never got a head coach job again after that, and never will.
I mean, Pat Shurmur's calling plays at Colorado. He's the offense coordinator. Joe Judge is at Ole Miss. But, I mean, like, I have no idea. But what happens in teams when desperation comes in is when exactly the scenario that you said with Pelinka, when there's no more buffer between somebody. There's no more, I can blame this guy, or we need this coach to come in. Daboll got hired to save Daniel Jones, right? Well, that's not working. As I've said on my pod, I mean, I love Brian. He's a great guy. But Brian was in Miami. They were terrible at quarterback. When they were terrible at quarterback at the Jets, Brian was there. When they were terrible at quarterback in Cleveland, Brian. I mean, you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. Like, you got to have a good player. Yeah. And when he went to Buffalo, he kind of got his career back. And that's how he became a head coach. So I think the Giants, I mean, this is where you have to have an honest conversation with yourself. Are we really good? Are we set up to win? I don't think. I've been saying this now, Bill, for 5 years. The Giants haven't been set up to win it since Coughlin left. They have no identity. They look like the Giants when I was growing up in the 70s, where I was at Hofstra and the only game you could watch were the Giants and the Jets. Talk about a troubled childhood, So yeah, I think it's hard on them. And then my man Bobby Saleh. I mean, look, I think they still
Big
have
Shot
a good
Bob.
team.
By the way, you can take Big Shot Bob if you want to take that one. Take it. Take Big Shot Bob. You can have it.
I mean, my Lord, I don't understand how you can be part of a Johnson & Johnson pharmaceutical world and think that this guy is going to lead your team into the promised land. Meanwhile, I mean, we could say this about everybody, but he can't make it. He just stands on the sideline now. He doesn't even make adjustments. But he came out this week and told everybody that being 0-1 with Aaron is a lot better than being 1-0 without him. Okay, great. And he's going to fix the defense. But here's what I think what happens. Here's what happens with people. They don't pay attention. Take a guess how many games Big Shot Bob's defense gave up over 130 yards rushing last year?
5?
Try 8. 8.
Ooh.
Now, if you're the greatest defense since the history of the 2000 Ravens, you may give up 200-yard games, right? You're not giving up any.
Yeah.
But of course, naturally, they gave up 8. People have run the ball on them. New England, the third game of the year, ran the ball up and down the field, and when they beat them. Like, I don't want to hear that they got some talented players, but this isn't a defense that just doesn't stone everybody. Like, they're going to have a hard time. And you know what's gotten lost in all this is nobody talks about how bad the Jets offense is in terms of how basic it is. It's day one West Coast install. I mean, it's not complicated at all. I mean, the first third down was why stick? Like, they run that over here at Ocean City High School.
I thought one of the reasons I thought that might be better is because Rodgers can do so much on the offensive side. And be like, well, Sal, the one thing we know he can do is coach a defense, and then their defense looked like complete crap.
He's like Gus Bradley, though. They don't have anything on their call sheet. Like in that game, the way that Kyle attacked him, if you listen to what Belichick was saying on the Manning podcast, you know, it was interesting. There were two things going on there. The Manning podcast was talking about, Bill was talking about the C-gap runs. But then when you went to Troy Aikman, Troy was saying, well, they're running inside and they had these stats. Well, that's because the guy collecting the data doesn't understand that just because the ball gets run inside, it's a B-gap play. Like all these runs were attacking the edges of the Jets defense. They're C-gap runs. And if you're not sturdy on the C-gap, but what Kyle did such a good job was he got angles on everybody. So instead of having to power somebody off the line, he just had to turn somebody. And it's brilliant. Walsh used to say this all the time. You know, all these coaches want to draw pass plays, but the great coaches know how to run the ball. Kyle knows how to run the ball. And when you know how to run the ball against Big Shot Bob, you can do some things. That's why 8 teams were able to go over 130, not over 100, over 130.
So there is a scenario. If they lost to Will Levis, and God help them if they lose to Will Levis on Sunday,
oh my God.
They play Thursday night against the Patriots in New Jersey. And the Patriots, I want to talk about them in a second. I have no idea if they're good or not, but on paper, the type of team that they could try to run the ball down the Jets' throat, 4 days rest from the last game, maybe try to just out-hustle them, out-coach them, and somehow the Jets are down 10-0. The crowd's booing. 0-3 is looming, and there's a 10 days before the next game stretch coming up. And I don't know. If I'm a Jets fan, I'm like, man, if we lose to Tennessee, this could go sideways fast. You got Rodgers, who's not shy about, throwing a little gasoline on the fire sometimes. I don't know.
It's must win in New York. I couldn't agree with you more about, look, on paper, turning the Jets card in and laying 3.5 to Will Levis, who his head coach admitted last week if they would have punted the ball on first down, they would have won the game. Right.
Yeah,
that's a very toxic statement. I have no confidence in Will. I've never did. Like I do Russo every Friday afternoon and we make 3 picks. And I was talking about how Chicago was way overvalued at 4.5 and 3. And then I didn't take it in one of my 3 and he took it. And he said, I can't believe you didn't take it. You were talking to somebody. I said, because I don't trust Will Levis. It's bad. Yeah. I knew Chicago wasn't worth that number, but you got to play the Will Levis factor in there. So, and then how do they, let's go through it. How does Tennessee get open against the Jets? I mean, the receivers at Tennessee aren't going to get, Hopkins isn't getting open. They don't even have to put Sauce Gardner on them. They'll put Gardner on Ridley. How do they move the ball on the Jets? How do they make plays? So how do they?
It's a game the Jets should win, and yet I'm never taking them ever.
They should win by 14. They should win by 3.5. They should win by 14.
One of my favorite Lombardi things, and this is the difference between somebody like you and somebody like me, because you work for a bunch of teams and you really understand this. You always had that thing about, if I don't do this now, I lose the locker room and the season's over. Once you lose the locker room, that's it. There's no going back. It feels like we're there with Cleveland. with Deshaun.
Yeah.
He's been so bad. He was so bad against Dallas. I don't know what he's good at anymore when I watch. Like, he used to be, he'd scramble around. He used to be dangerous. He used to be explosive. He just seems to me like a guy who's shell-shocked. Sal and I talked on Sunday night. There was that one play. He just went straight back. He got perfect blocking, and he just decided to veer out to the right, Zach Wilson style. And you could just see 3 Browns linemen just kind of watching him going, we just fucking blocked for you. Where the fuck are you going?
Yeah.
And he just to run away. It just seems like he's a lost cause. Is Stefanski at the point where if he like, let's say they're awful this week, and I think they're going to be, like, how do you just keep starting this guy? You can't.
Well, you have to, because the owner, Bill, they doubled down on this deal. They guaranteed his salary this year, which was already guaranteed. So next year, his cap number goes up to $72 million. His accelerator, you can't cut him. Like, this is worse. This is going to make George Payton feel happy about having the worst contest ever given to Russell Wilson. This is going to make. But George
why can't
happy.
You just bench him? Why can't he just be the backup?
Well, because I think the owner who gave him the deal, and now you got to go walk up to because the owners blamed everybody else. You fired Alex Van Pelt. I mean, think about this. Joe Flacco throws for 1,616 yards in 5 games. Watson throws for 1,104 in 6 games.
Yeah.
It wasn't the offense that was broken. It wasn't, what our job is to figure out players, coaches, or scheme in any sport. To me, that's how you do an autopsy on a team. Is it the players? Is it the coaches? Is it the scheme? Okay. It's easier in the NBA because it's usually relative to the players, but sometimes the schemes don't work. But to me, that's where they made the biggest mistake. They're saying the scheme was wrong for Deshaun, so we have to run a different scheme. Well, look now what you get. I mean, Dallas didn't even play good the other day.
What's he good at? What scheme is right for him? I don't know what his skills are anymore.
I will fully confess I was a Deshaun Watson fan coming out of college. He was good in Houston. When he had Will Fuller, he threw the deep ball as well as anybody in the league. But I think, which we don't ever talk about, but I think money can spoil your appetite. It really. Yeah. I mean, he's a very wealthy man. I don't care how many more lawsuits he gets against him. He's made so much money. I don't know if he has the same hunger and the same desire to prove that he can come back from it. You listen to his press conference. But there's no energy in the guy. There's nothing. And now he's got this other suit, which has got a video attached to it. I mean, and if he has another one after he's been suspended, how do they not suspend him for another year?
Well, I see. So there's a few things going on, but you made the key point. But just going backwards, his arm doesn't seem as explosive. He doesn't seem as fearless anymore. I don't think he seems as fast as he was 4 years ago. So those are 3 things. But then the other piece that you just mentioned, the quarterback's the leader of the team. They have to be the coolest guy in the huddle. They have to be the guy that galvanizes everybody up, that lifts you up, that, they're the pilot with the plane going like this, and they're the guys making you feel safe. And I'm only watching on my TV, but when I watch him, he just doesn't seem like he gives a shit.
Right.
And I can only judge what I see from the replays and how he's interacting with people. But to me, he just doesn't seem like he really cares. And when your quarterback's bad and also doesn't seem like he really cares, I don't know how that's sustainable.
Well, I thought the same thing with Zach Wilson. I didn't think he cared last year. I think he thought it was, it never felt important to me with Zach Wilson. Like, it was just too hard. It was too hard to do the homework. It was too hard. Look, I think the first quarter down in Jacksonville might be the biggest quarter for the Cleveland Browns football ever. Because I agree with you. I mean, Kevin Stefanski will not be able to have any authority within that team if he lets this guy continue to play shitty and those guys on defense are playing really good. Now, we know this about Cleveland's defense. The numbers are staggering, the difference between what they did at home and what they did on the road. I mean, they gave up 3,000 yards on the road. They gave up like 1,100 at home. I mean, it's just like ridiculous. But, and of course, they've got Doug on the other sideline, which can help them as he was helping Miami the other day.
Fourth down, Doug. Let's go for it. What the hell?
For what reason? For what reason could you possibly explain that? But not to lose track here, but I think that first quarter is so damn important because if he doesn't come out and play good, and he comes out and throws like he's been nosedive balls into the dirt, they have no run game. I mean, their offensive line's a mess because of the injuries, but they have no run game. And you think Amari Cooper's going to be happy? You think, Jerry Judy's going to be happy?
When their offensive line's banged up? I mean, it's still not 100%.
Look, the owner runs the team, right? I've worked there. He made the trade. He took responsibility for it. Can't fire himself, but this is a hole that's hard to dig out of. It's really a hole hard to dig out of.
And Stefanski, I don't think he's one of the 4 best coaches in the league, but I think he's in the top 10. I think
He's won
done
Coach of the Year
the
twice.
stuff he's done. The stuff he's done compared to the talent he's had and the situation he's been in. I think him and Kevin O'Connell, the 2 Kevins have been good.
Right. And look, I mean, he didn't want to fire Alex Van Pelt. He didn't want to make all these changes on his offensive staff. I don't know if it was Jimmy or Dee Haslam or if it was Paul DiPodesto, but somebody else is running it. Look, they've got a lot of people. They got a lot of people trying to run the team that may not really understand football because they're so based on analytics. And this is where you get caught, is what your question was. If you don't understand football and you don't understand the locker room and you don't understand the impact of a guy who can't lead, then you don't understand how you're going to win. That's really the issue. You can't figure out how to win.
And somehow we talked about Deshaun and all the football stuff and didn't even talk about all the lawsuits and the off the field stuff, which is yet another reason this is such a disaster. You mentioned the Jaguars. So I had 6 week 1 teams. I mentioned earlier about week 1, it could go either way in week 2, but then after week 2, you look back and you go, oh, now that makes sense from week 1. I had the Jaguars. I bet on the Jaguars. They actually covered the 3.5. I thought they played really well for 3 quarters, and I actually think they might be good. And I think the result of that game was stupid. Now, we're taping this for Miami Buffalo tonight. But if ETN just runs in the end zone, they're up 24-7, the game's over. I thought their defense was good. I think they have a lot of talent. And I'm not willing to basically admit I was wrong on the Jaguars because I thought they'd be a 10-win team. Isn't this line has like been basically 2.5 and now it's at 3? It was at 3.5 for a second. Now it's Jaguars 3. But are the Jaguars good?
I think they are. I mean, I think they really are. No, Lawrence was really good in the first half. They threw it down the field better than he ever had. They turned it over. Doug makes some questionable decisions, but I think Ryan Nielsen, the new defensive coordinator, was good in Atlanta. Think about Atlanta, right? Last year, Atlanta had no pass rush whatsoever. Couldn't create turnovers, but he was 3rd in the league in 3rd down defense. That's really good with no pass rush. He was 4th in the league in red zone defense. So he kept you out of the end zone and he got off the field on 3rd down. I think he did a really good job. I know he gave up a lot of yards to him and he gave up the big play to Tyreek Hill, but I thought they played him really well.
But who else scores on that Tyreek touchdown? I mean, that was a fucking miracle. It's nobody. He does a 90-degree angle down the sideline. It's impossible.
He's unbelievable. He's the best receiver in football, and he's the scariest one. So I think, to me, there's something fish. This line at 3 and that Jet Tennessee line are the 2 ones that look too easy. They just look too easy because Jacksonville. But I think
a lot of people still like Cleveland. I don't think they see the Deshaun Watson thing. I think there's people out there that are just going to assume that, he had a bad game, he'll play better this week. And I think his career's over. I really do.
I think we're done. Last week. I liked Dallas last week for this reason. Everybody was talking about all the problems in Dallas, but they were all contract issues, right? That doesn't really affect. The problems were in the Cleveland. They got new offensive coordinator. They got a defense that doesn't play well on the road, right? They got a quarterback who can't make a throw. I mean, there were more issues with them, and it proved to be the truth, right? It's the same thing. Cleveland's defense, this is the anomaly you'll never really understand. Cleveland's defense was the number 1 defense in the National Football League on 3rd down. They were 32nd in the red zone. So if you got the ball in the red zone on them, you scored. And so, how does those 2 things come together? I think, to me, I thought I was never buying in on Cleveland. I think, to me, there is going to be a regression to the mean, especially defensively, the way they played on the road. And I thought Dallas was the line moved all. Dallas was the favorite, ended up being the dog in the game. I think Jacksonville should be, I think it should be a 3.5 game. That's what I think it should be. But
I think that's
if you
where
get it
at
land. 3, I think if you get it at 3, you got to take Jacksonville.
I had more to do on these week 1, week 2 teams, but I forgot to ask you, why don't the Jets just sign Hassan Reddick? What's the point of this?
He won't sign. I was told last week he was going to go in by a lot of people that know him, and he's due to make $14 million. It's the dumbest holdout since Le'Veon Bell. And then he didn't show up. Like, I think this is one of those where his agency, whoever they are, and they're not getting along. Like, they can't talk sense into the kid, because anybody, if you represented them, you would be able to say, look, you're giving away money. You have 1 year left on a contract. Go in, get 12 sacks, and we'll get to the market next year and you'll make $70 million. Like, why are we giving money back to them? And now, he's not coming in unless he gets money. Now it's a principle thing for him. It's the dumbest holdout since Le'Veon Bell.
So it wasn't actually business. It became personal. He forgot one of the biggest rules of The Godfather. What's he doing?
That's right. I mean,
somebody should show him The Godfather.
Joe Douglas trades for this guy and doesn't have the contract worked out. Like, he was, one thing, give Reddick credit. I think it's the dumbest holdout of all time. But one thing, give Reddick credit, is he was very clear with what he wanted. Now, nothing says I'm sorry better than money. We know this. But the Jets don't want to say they're sorry. They're not giving them money.
See, I think Le'Veon Bell's contract was dumber because the running back shelf life, we already knew at that point, was pretty short to begin with. And it's like, you have this many years to make money. So I talked about that week 1, week 2 conundrum. The number one game for this is New England, Cincinnati, week 1. Because there's a version of that game that Cincinnati just sucked, right? They didn't play well. If they score and make it 7-7 in the second quarter, they probably end up winning. New England was able to run the ball really well. They blocked for some reason, which nobody expected, most of all me. They replaced their left tackle in the first quarter, and all of a sudden, the right side of the line looked like the early 90s Cowboys. And they only scored 16 points and they won anyway, but it felt convincing. And it's like, you know what? We'll look back at that and be like, man, that was a dumb game. There's another scenario where the Pats might actually be pretty frisky and a little discount 2001 Patriots-ish, where just a defense where now that they actually do have a pass rush, which I don't think either of us thought they were going to have without Barmore and Judon, but it seemed like they had one, combined with the back seven, which is really good, and the strength of the team, and an ability to run the ball, which nobody was expecting. And everybody seems to be playing hard for Mayo, which you can feel it from the quotes and you can feel it from the postgame stuff. And maybe they're decent, which makes me think maybe the Bengals are okay. But there's another scenario where the Seattle waxes the Pats this week. And then we're like, oh, the Bengals aren't okay because Seattle just killed the Patriots. So where do you stand? How's it going to play out?
Well, I think the Patriots have one way to play. And the way they played on Sunday was exactly the only way they can play. They've got to play from in front. They've got to run the ball. And they've got to hope their defense can hold up. Now, they got a big break. Cincinnati's offensive line, our Trent Brown guy at right tackle, was a disaster. He did not play well. Zach Taylor, I don't understand it, but the guy's now he's 0-5 and open in the first 2 weeks of the season, the last 2 years. I mean, he never gets his team ready to play. I mean, and I thought he was better this summer in terms of playing people, but they're never ready. Like, that game was all about the first quarter. If you don't if you're Cincinnati and you don't score on the first drive and make the Patriots have to go put the ball in Brissett's hands for 40 times, they're going to keep them in the game, and then they're going to build some confidence and momentum, and then you're going to be in trouble. They didn't get a first down in the first quarter. Forget about scoring. So I agree. If they would have scored on that play, it probably would have given them some life. But look, I think every game will be a struggle for the Patriots. I think Seattle, their offensive line is not very good. They lost their tackle. The one thing there is good is New England's got a powerful defensive front. They can push people back. They'll create a problem for Seattle. If Kenneth Walker's not healthy, which it sounds like he's not, that's an issue too. So I think they're going to be frisky in games. I don't think they're going to be 10-point dogs at the time. Now they're 3.5-point dogs or 3-point dogs here. I think they're frisky enough to where they'll play because they're good enough to play on defense. And if you don't understand how you have to play them, like if I'm Seattle, I'm saying everything. We got to score. We got to score early. We got to get in front of these guys. Make Brissett beat us. But if you don't do that, like Zach Taylor obviously didn't do it, and then they ran the ball. See, to me, Cincinnati, they couldn't stop the run, they missed DJ Reader badly.
I agree with that, and I also the Chase thing, the holdout, and Burrow with his hand, and all the vibes are off on that team.
They offered Chase, according to the reports today, which I think is true, and I've heard this to be true. They offered him $35 a year with like $90 guaranteed, and he turned it down because he said he wants way more than Jefferson. Well, now you're being unreasonable. Like the market is the market. And if the Brown family is willing to pay you the market, that's why the Brown family said, enough of this shit. You're out. We're done. We're not doing it anymore. We've offered you the best deal we can. You turn that down, you go on your own. We still own you. We have your rights for 4 more years. We have this year, we have the 5th-year option, and we have 2 franchise years.
So the Pats and the Chargers look very similar to me in week 1. And the Chargers have a more proven coach, but same kind of recipe, right? Let's try to get the lead. Let's try to establish the run and keep running, and then we can throw out a position of strength. Let's fly around on defense. I thought the Chargers defense, especially in the second half of that game, was pretty good. We also have no idea how bad the Raiders are. I guess we're going to find that out. Minshew did have he completed like 80% of his passes, so it's not like they weren't moving the ball. But
they're in the game. Chargers, Antonio Pierce goes for it. If he goes for it on 4th down, maybe and doesn't call like an inside zone play and get stuffed, maybe he would have been in it. I don't think the Chargers look very good. I thought Herbert was probably the most disappointing player of week 1 that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, they only scored 22 points. It was a little similar to the Pats. Like they did just enough to win. But that was another game where I'm like, I think the Raiders are bad, but maybe the Chargers are also better than people think. But yeah, I mean, who's he throwing to? Like Palmer is questionable for this week. He's got McConkey, the rookie, but the last year's rookie seems like he was a bust.
Yeah, they have no skill. They don't have a tight end that can make a play. I think, look, if you had any guts, you'd take Carolina and the 6 at home. I don't have enough guts to do that. I mean, that's what separates me from the betting world, because I look at that strictly as like there's, but the number is the number. Like I think Carolina's so shitty, and Bryce Young, he's played 18 games now, and he hasn't shown that he's got any ability to come out of it. And the Raiders can rush. I mean, the Raiders, Max Crosby's a problem. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. The Mac can rush, and they've got the defensive front. So I don't trust the Chargers because they didn't have any stake.
Wow, Harbaugh's your guy. I'm surprised you don't trust him.
I love Harbaugh. I think to me he's got to play a certain way. You nailed it. He's got to play like the Patriots, but their skill is terrible. I was disappointed with Herbert. He didn't make any throw. Every score they had was off a big run.
I wonder how many teams this year if we can just take a lead heading into halftime, we can probably win. But if we fall behind by 10, we're dead.
Yeah.
It seems like we have more teams than usual this year that
that's the league, though. Why was Dallas so good last year? They had a plus 124 point differential. They went into halftime with a 124-point lead. Any team, look, when we do this podcast in January, the teams that are first half point differential in the advantage, who are the top 4 teams in that category, are be the winners. It's style of play, right? The teams most of the teams are somewhat even. There's obviously better teams, but if you can play a certain style, this is why basketball, you learn so much watching basketball for NFL, because if you listen to the college basketball coaches, they'll say, if we play this game in the 60s, we have a chance. If we play it in the 80s, we can't win. College coaches understand style of play. Some of the NFL coaches, Zach Taylor, some of these guys, they don't understand. They just run their stuff. They don't understand that it's a 3-dimensional game and you got to play a certain style. If New England doesn't play a style, say Seattle gets the opening kick, scores a touchdown, say New England fumbles, they pick it up, they scoop and score. Now they're down 14-0. Now it's a different game. You can't be as patient.
Did the Bears defense change your mind at all about the ceiling of that team? Because you and I are both laughing during the summer about that over-under was 8.5. Heavy action on the 8.5. People going nuts about Caleb, them putting together this pass-first 3-receiver offense that as soon as it gets cold is going to make no sense at all. And yet, their defense looked good.
Well, they played Will Levis. I mean, he missed 2 guys. He had a guy wide open in the end zone for a touchdown. I mean, the guy's sitting there like he was going to fair catch the ball. It took forever for him to get it to him. That's a touchdown there. Yeah, that guy's wide open. They ran the ball on the Bears defense.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the Bears are soft. That you're not running that offense that the Bears are trying to run in Chicago when it gets cold. I mean, Tennessee kicked their ass up front. If you and I sat down and watched the all 22 of that game, Tennessee kicked their ass up front.
Okay.
I have a problem. I think the Bears are be good on defense. I mean, they're play smart, all that. But
all right, so you think that was Levis related?
I think everything. Look, Tennessee ran the ball when he took Levis away from it. and he could hand the ball off, Tennessee's offense was actually better. The guy couldn't even complete a screen half the time.
My last one was, and we don't know the answer to the Buffalo side of this because we're taping before the Thursday night game, but I thought the Cards offense looked good, and people were making a big deal after about how Kyler wasn't throwing it long, but I just thought he had control of the game. Harrison had a shit game, and they barely went to him. When they went to him, he dropped a pretty big pass, but they were moving the ball that whole game.
Yeah,
and if Buffalo is actually a playoff team, and I'm still not sure, but I was impressed. I actually thought they were going to come down. I thought the guy got interfered with on the last play.
Yeah.
And I thought they had a chance to steal it. So they're playing this Rams team this weekend that, has already had just a shitload of injuries. I'm afraid to go against McVay, but when your offensive line's decimated, you don't have Aaron Donald anymore. The Puka's already gone, and you're just like, what's the point of no return for injuries? They're kind of almost there. And I feel like the Cards could steal it, but yet everyone's like, well, McVay owns Arizona. Do you believe in the coach owns franchise blank theory?
Yeah, and I think when you have all these injuries that he has, he can game plan around it. Now, he's got 4 offensive linemen. He had to bring guys in. I thought Stafford was really good last week. I think he took a beat and he made throws. I mean, look, if you're going to give me a point and to keep Sean McVay from going 0-2, I'll take the point. I believe in game plan. I think that Arizona defense is atrocious. Now I know I think to me, and Stafford will make enough plays. Cooper Kupp could still make plays. So, look, I don't know. To me, I think Buffalo's an average team with a great quarterback. And I don't think you should ever deviate from that. I think they're a very average team with a great quarterback. I think Miami will do a lot of tonight. Here's where I think the advantage is for Miami tonight, Jordan Poyer. So Miami has Jordan Poyer on their team. He knows everything about Buffalo's defense from chapter to verse. He's going to help them. I mean, they're going to run some stuff that Buffalo's not used to seeing that's going to attack Buffalo. If Miami doesn't win this game, they're never going to beat a good team. And I'm not sure Buffalo is a good team. Even if Miami wins, I'm not going to acquiesce and say, oh, finally they beat a good team.
So do you believe in the coach owns franchise blank? Because I never believed it until I felt like the Patriots were going to beat Buffalo no matter who was on Buffalo's team with the entire time we had Brady. It was just like, we're never losing to Buffalo ever.
Yeah, they would have lost to Buffalo. I mean, look, they got Josh Allen, so that changes the dynamic. But I think
I get it. I'm saying for 20 years, I was just like, mark those 2 wins down. We own Buffalo.
How about I think to me, Sean understands certain games they're comfortable playing. There is a comfort level of play in there. I think Sean's a really good coach. And you give him a week to game plan when he knows he doesn't have this player or that player. It's hard when you do it on the game. That left tackle that they put in against Detroit was so bad. That poor kid had no chance to play. And
it's
yet
like
they
a third stringer, right?
Yeah. Right. And still they got the game in overtime.
Are you with me on the Steelers just in general?
I think if you like ugly football and you like Mike Tomlin like I do, yeah. I mean, I regretted I didn't take him on the Russo contest, but to me, they did exactly what they had to do to win the game. They ran the football. I said this on Monday, and Arthur Smith confirmed it today. But here's when you know you got a good coach. Arthur Smith was not going to let Justin Fields throw the ball in the middle of the field. He was never going to let him throw it. He threw it all outside the numbers. And so because he didn't want Jesse Bates making a play. So they took away their best player. Meanwhile, for some reason, the Super Bowl winning champion Atlanta Falcons decided that TJ Watt wasn't going to play in the game, so they didn't worry about him. And he just destroyed the game. I mean, look, I'm worried about Cousins. I don't know what you thought, but I was worried about Cousins. And
What do you mean? What did I thought? I thought he was a statue. He could move.
I mean, that offensive line's not any good in Atlanta. They're not. They can't pass protect. McCrary got his ass kicked. This week against Philly, they'll be challenged. So I think all those people that bought tickets for Atlanta to win the Super Bowl, you might want to think about selling them if you can.
It would be hilarious if Penix turned out to be a great pick because Cousins wasn't healthy.
Or Cousins.
The Cousins signing was bad, but Penix made all right, we at least salvaged it with the Penix trade.
If it's $100 million in the hole, you're $100 million in the hole.
Well, that was just 25% of the teams are just they're playing with 80% of a salary cap. All right, that's it for football. We have 2 other topics for you. One, have you talked yourself into the new big 3 of Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey yet?
I'm not going down. I'm not getting talked into that. You're going to, it'll be February before I'm ever going to be convinced of that. I'm just not going there. I'm not. I don't
What
think
part
they have
scares you
any.
the most? What is it? The
They,
injury factor? Is it the
they have no mental.
sacrificing? Is
They have no mental toughness as a team. Like you can't be a championship team without mental toughness. And if your best player has zero mental toughness, how are you going to be a championship team?
he's a gold medalist?
Yeah, thanks to the guy who put his team on his back and said, "Fellas, just get the fuck out of
What
the
a
way. I'm
gold
going to win
medal!
this
It's all
game for
different now.
you." I mean, that great players play great when greatness is needed. That's what he was. I'm not going. Look, I know I've been down this road and they pull me back in. I'm not going down the road. I can't. I'm not. It's just I know the outcome of this. Like I've seen it. There's no toughness. I believe in toughness. I believe in championship character. I believe in hard work. All those things that Brady echoed at his Hall of Fame speech, I believe in. And that hasn't changed since time immemorial. So I don't understand how they're going to win. I don't care, what pieces, I mean, I appreciate them signing that French guy because he was tough, but the team's not tough.
You know what's funny? You always complain about your friend Big Daddy, the Packers fan.
Yeah.
Who's just always glass half. To say he's glass half full would be an understatement. He's glass like 5% full.
Yeah.
But you're kind of the Big Daddy of the Sixers. That's
right,
who you've
but
turned
only
into.
because I don't like the star player. I just don't buy into him. If he were gone and they had other people, I would be more enthusiastic. I am usually. It's why Belichick and I got along so good. I'm usually Mr. Positive and he was Mr. Negative, and so we kind
Yeah.
of met in the middle a little bit. I'm typically I'm the happy scout. I'm not the miserable scout. Like some scouts, oh, this guy's no good. Well, he's going in the Hall of Fame. Oh, he's no
Right.
fucking good. But this guy has destroyed me forever because of the media perception about him, and nobody's willing to say he's not in shape. Nobody's willing to say he could be great if he would get in shape. Nobody's willing to criticize him. They all buy his, oh yeah, I'm a star, like win a championship. Show me that you really care.
How about make round 3?
How about make round 3? How about care?
I really like
care.
Embiid. I just want to say I really like Embiid, the person. And I don't understand why he doesn't understand the get in shape piece of this, which makes me almost think his body is like breaking down and he's holding on for dear life.
All right, let me ask you this question. What are the chances that he's healthy April 1st of next year?
I would honestly say 50-50.
Yeah, I think
right. There's a 50% chance.
All right. And what's the chances that he's in shape in May 1st of next year?
But you and I, we're both old. Like, we know what happens with centers as they get older and they put weight on them. Guess what happens? They get hurt. That's how it goes. You hit your 30s, put a little weight here, a little weight there. Now all of a sudden, my knee, I got tendonitis, and my back. So this was the last 4 or 5 years of Shaq's career. He just put on and people will be like, "Oh no, Shaq made the All-Star team in 2008." Like, Shaq was a completely different guy the last 5, 6, 7 years of his career than where he started.
So you asked me, am I negative? I just see the future. I know where this train's coming. There's another train.
Yeah, but you know what's funny though? You didn't even mention the Paul George piece of a month in where the first story, like sources say Paul George is unhappy. He's standing in the corner so much on offense for Philly. Wish he had the ball more.
Well,
because Maxey's great. Everyone loves Maxey.
I love Maxey. I'm all in on Maxey. But here's where I think this, to me, if I were prosecuting the Embiid love affair in a court, I would call the dream team as my witnesses, because as great as that team was, he really couldn't even play with that team. So all this conversation about, well, he just needs the right pieces around him is bullshit, because he was playing on the greatest semblance of basketball players in the world, and he still couldn't play on that team.
I guess I have 2 more things. You're doing a pod with Belichick, he's on like 7 shows. He went from one-word answers in a press conference to if you just put a mic in front of him, he's talking. But it just seems like he's getting a complete kick out of this whole thing. Like, it's like he's had all this stuff bottled up forever.
Yeah, I think what he really loves, we're doing this thing called the Encyclopedia on YouTube too, where we're going to do a weekly pod that he and I are going to look back on this week. I think Matt, Patricia, and him are going to look ahead. But the one thing we're all doing is we're doing what we call the library, the encyclopedia. So we're doing a bunch of different things on the Hall of Fame. We're doing things on evaluation, the process of building a team, all that stuff. And then we're going to put that in the library on the YouTube. And that that's where he loves that. I mean, that's where he kind of comes to out and he enjoys it. And I think to me, the way he's approached it, he's working as hard as ever. He's in NFL films for 3 days. He's watching tape, and I can't believe somebody wouldn't call him next offseason, but I think he's preparing as if because of his age, and maybe nobody would call. I got to have a career after this.
I think the complete opposite. I think this is a 6-month sprint until February, and he's getting a job. I think so 9 too. Jobs open as always, and he'll be ready. And he stayed in the limelight, and this was all really smart.
But Bill, when you finished 3rd in the Atlanta Falcons selection, you weren't even in their top 3 in the selection committee. Tough. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. But I do think that there's going to be there is definitely a gap between, like I did today. I'm writing a column for tomorrow. I borrowed one of your great things was what team has no chance? And there's like 8 teams right now that have no chance. Like you could eliminate 8 teams from ever thinking about they're going to the playoffs. 8 right now. That's a lot of teams.
Yeah.
In week 1, I don't think I'm wrong on any of them. Do you think Arizona has a chance? Do you think the Raiders have a chance? Do you think Washington has a chance? The Giants have a chance? Do you think Tennessee has a chance? Do you think Carolina, that's 6? Denver,
so you talk about
7?
cross-off teams. Yeah, there's Sal and I always try to do 1 a week, and we did, after week 1 we did 2. We were like Carolina and the Giants cross-offs. Done.
I'm going to give you 8. Now, I don't know if I put Denver in there because Denver has no chance to win a Super Bowl, but Denver's going to improve. But I'm talking about teams that have no chance at all. Like Tennessee has no chance. They're kidding themselves with Lillard. Just like the Giants are kidding themselves. Washington's got a young quarterback, but their team sucks. I mean, there's all different scenarios. But has there ever been a time where 8 teams you could just eliminate and say they got no chance?
Not after week 1. And I honestly, I would throw in Cleveland. I think the Deshaun thing is single-handedly going to kill their season. I think Belichick's back in February. That's my prediction. What happens first? Belichick is coaching again, or Bob Kraft is in the Hall of Fame? I know you read that piece.
I read that word for word. I mean, I've seen that. I mean, to try to deny that he had nothing to do with that documentary. Come on now, that's not fair.
Well, I was waiting. I worked with Alex Gibney, and he's a great guy. We did.
And isn't Alex doing the Sopranos thing?
Oh, it's up. That was my last thing I had.
I saw one episode last night. That's the same guy who did the documentary on the Patriots.
Yeah, he's one of the great documentarians of all time. And I had heard that he was involved because it was in the press release. They did a press release, or it came out that he was, and then all of a sudden, by the time the doc came out, he wasn't involved. And I was like, oh. That I guarantee, because that guy he did the Enron doc, like he doesn't fuck around with this stuff. So if it was like, this has to be a puff piece with Kraft with final editorial control, that guy must have been like, I'm out. I don't know the story yet.
You're going to find this hard to believe, but I truly believe because Kraft hired the greatest coach of all time, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I believe that wholeheartedly.
If Jerry Jones is in, Kraft should be in, but I think he's pushing for it too hard.
That's my problem is like, just why are you trying to take credit for shit you didn't do? Like, why not? If he would have gotten
What do you mean? If it wasn't for him, Belichick and Brady wouldn't have been able to coexist for that long because Kraft was just brokering the peace between them at all times. It was that acrimonious.
Just enjoy the 6 Super Bowls. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, I think he deserves to get in. I've said it before, but this egocentric drive to take credit for it. Like, you're the owner. Why do you need credit? Like, you own the team.
You saved the team. Trophies. They were going to move. You saved them. You kept them in New England.
I mean, Art Rooney, he went through all those years being bad at Pittsburgh. He didn't try to take credit for the Super Bowls. He was generous in giving, whereas this guy's trying to take everything from him. Like, that's why he's not getting in. He's trying too hard.
Well, we're going to wrap up, but I'm stunned you haven't watched both episodes of The Sopranos doc yet. I know it's
watched
first week
one
of football
last night.
season, but it's an absolute outrage. I've already done a podcast 2 days ago with Fantasy and Van Lathan about how great it was. I thought you were the number one Sopranos fan.
I didn't listen to that yet. I'll listen to that.
Every rule you have is from The Sopranos and The Godfather, and you haven't watched The Sopranos doc?
I saw the one last night. I thought it was fabulous last night. In fact, the going through the auditions were tremendous, right? They were just tremendous. I didn't see an Uncle Junior audition, which was very disappointing. Like I would have loved to seen that, but I mean, you talk about me being miserable. David Chase just lives a miserable life. Does he ever?
Wait till you get
happy?
to part two. Part two, it really dives into that. Like when basically him and Gandolfini and Soprano just merge into one miserable entity. So they get into it. Well, I'm excited for you to watch the rest of it. It's great.
Yeah.
Lombardi, we can hear you all over the place, but especially the GM Shuffle podcast.
GM Shuffle,
Coach
Veasan.
On Belichick, find that on YouTube, and Veasan Morning Show, and you're working hard. It's I always enjoy the content. Great to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate you.